Hello everyone, welcome back to my Royal Life News channel. The story for today is the Queen and members of the royal family experienced heartache in 2021 following the death of the monarch's husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, on the 9th of April at Windsor Castle. Her Majesty, along with her children and grandchildren, bid an emotional farewell to Prince Philip at his funeral on Saturday the 17th of April at St. George Chapel in Windsor. While plans for Prince Philip's funeral were modified in light of COVID-19 restrictions, the ceremonial aspects of the day and the service were still in line with the Duke's wishes, Buckingham Palace said at the time. Only 30 guests were attendants at the service, and these included all of Philip's children and grandchildren plus their spouses, the children of the Queen's sister Princess Margaret, and 3 of Philip's German relatives, Bernard, hereditary Prince of Baden, Prince Donatus, Landgrave of Hesse, and Prince Philip of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Also invited was a close friend of Philip's, the Countess Mountbatten of Burma, Penelope Penny Knatchbull, who was previously known as Lady Romsey and later Lady Brabourne, and was the Duke's carriage-driving partner. No members of the royal family were in military uniform. The men wore mourning coats with their medals while the women appeared in day dresses. Leading the procession to the chapel were the band of the Grenadier Guards, followed by the Major General commanding the Household Division, service chiefs, the Duke of Edinburgh's coffin on a custom-built Land Rover hearse, members of the royal family on foot, Philip's household staff, and finally a Bentley carrying the Queen. A national minute's silence took place at 3 p.m. at the start of the funeral, and the Duke was interred in the royal vault in the chapel at the end of the service, which was conducted by the Dean of Windsor, David Connor. The Prince of Wales was pictured wearing a black face mask on his way to the service in Windsor. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were pictured arriving at the service. Prince William shared a touching tribute to the Duke, saying, "I will always be grateful that my wife had so many years to get to know my grandfather and for the kindness he showed her. I will never take for granted the special memories my children will always have of their great-grandpa coming to collect them in his carriage and seeing for themselves his infectious sense of adventure as well as his mischievous sense of humor." The Duchess of Cambridge stepped out in an elegant and meaningful outfit for Prince Philip's funeral, choosing to pay tribute to both the Queen and the late Princess Diana by wearing the iconic Japanese pearl choker necklace. The 4-strand necklace with a central diamond clasp was commissioned by the Queen herself, made from pearls given to her by the Japanese government. While the necklace belongs to Her Majesty, Kate's late mother-in-law Diana famously wore the beautiful necklace at a state banquet for the Netherlands in 1982. Zara arrived with her husband Mike in a separate car. The couple welcomed their third child on the 21st of March, calling him Lucas Philip Tyndall, with his middle name a touching tribute to Zara's late grandfather. Countess Mountbatten of Burma, Penelope Knatchbull, who had always been one of the closest companions of both the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, was among the attendees. The Duke's cap, whip and brown gloves were laid on the seat of his favourite driving carriage as it was brought into the quadrangle. The carriage was pulled by his 2 trusty black fell ponies, Balmoral Nevis and Knotlaw Storm. Members of the military lined the entrance to Windsor Castle in honour of the late Duke, who served in the Royal Navy. Members of the royal family not involved in the procession arrived at Windsor Castle by car, including the Duchess of Cornwall. The Countess of Wessex was pictured making her way into the service, while the Earl of Wessex took part in the procession on foot. Prince Edward and Sophie, along with their daughter, Lady Louise Windsor, viewed floral tributes for Prince Philip at St. George Chapel before the funeral. Princess Beatrice, accompanied by her husband, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, was also among the Queen's grandchildren present at the service. The monarch and Prince Philip attended Princess Beatrice and Edoardo's wedding in Windsor in July 2020. Princess Eugenie and Jack arrived at the service, travelling from nearby Frogmore Cottage in Windsor. The couple welcomed their first child in February and named him August Philip Hawke Brooksbank, paying tribute to Eugenie's late grandfather. Royal cousins Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie and Zara Tyndall lined up with their partners outside the chapel ahead of their grandfather's funeral. The Duke's coffin, accompanied by the Dean of Windsor and the Lord Chamberlain, was moved to the state entrance of Windsor Castle by a bearer party of the Queen's Company, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards. The bearer party placed the coffin onto a specially modified Land Rover, which Philip helped to design, to transport it to St. George Chapel. The coffin was draped in the Duke's personal standard and with flowers, his naval cap and sword placed on top. Members of the royal family, not involved in the procession, waited outside the chapel, including the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Cambridge, the Countess of Wessex, Princess Beatrice and Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank, and Mike and Zara Tyndall. The Duke of Sussex was pictured for the first time in the UK since stepping back from royal duties with wife Meghan in March 2020. Prince Harry joined cousin, Peter Phillips, and older brother, Prince William, in the procession. The Duchess of Sussex was advised not to travel to the UK by her doctor due to the advanced stage of her pregnancy at the time. The couple's daughter Lilibet was born in June 2021. She and her husband Prince Harry also provided a wreath to be laid during the service at St. George Chapel in Windsor. The wreath, which was accompanied by a handwritten note from the Duchess, was made up of a variety of locally sourced flowers. Harry and Meghan commissioned one of their favorite florists to make and design the wreath, Willow Crossley, who also did the flower arrangements for the couple's evening wedding reception in Frogmore Gardens in 2018, their son Archie's christening in 2019, and the launch event for the Hub Community Cookbook at Kensington Palace. Joining Princes William and Harry in the procession were Prince Charles, Princess Anne and her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and the Earl of Snowdon. Also in the procession were 6 of the Duke of Edinburgh's staff members, including his personal protection officer, his private secretary, 2 valets and 2 pages. A close-up photo showed members of the military accompanying the late Duke's hearse on its journey to Windsor Castle. The Queen, arriving at the service, was accompanied by her lady-in-waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, in the state Bentley. The monarch was dressed in a black day coat and wore a face covering. Ordinarily the Queen would have been seated closely with members of her family, but the royals were socially distanced at the service inside St. George Chapel in Windsor. The monarch sat in the second row at the service, 2 seats away from her second son, the Duke of York, and opposite her heir, the Prince of Wales, and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall. It was not unusual for the Queen to be seated in the second row, as she also sat in the same position at the weddings of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and Princess Eugenie and Jack Brooksbank in 2018. Sitting opposite Harry was his older brother and his wife, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, with the Earl and Countess of Wessex and their children, Lady Louise Windsor and James, Viscount Severn, seated in between William and Kate, and Charles and Camilla. Prince Philip's dignified funeral, a look back at the royal family's heartbreaking day. Lady Louise Windsor paid a touching tribute to her late grandfather by accessorizing her outfit with an equestrian brooch, a nod to their shared passion for carriage riding. No sermon was delivered during the ceremonial royal service, in keeping with Prince Philip's wishes. No members of the royal family read lessons or gave readings, and there was no eulogy. We understand that this was kept in line with the Queen Mother's funeral in 2002 when the delivery of readings was left to the clergy, and there was no eulogy then either. The Queen personally selected the flowers that adorned her late husband's coffin. The funeral wreath was chosen by Her Majesty and included white lilies, small white roses, white freesia, white wax flower, white sweet peas and jasmine. A great deal of thought went into the Queen's poignant selection, with each holding a special significance in tribute to her husband Prince Philip and their enduring marriage. White lilies are often seen at weddings and funerals since they represent rebirth, while the white rose is a sign of respect or remembrance. Notably, it is also the flower of June, Philip's birth month. Jasmine, meanwhile, is symbolic of purity, and sweet peas represent a departure or thank you. The white wax flowers symbolizes a lasting love or a love that endures time and trials. The Queen paid a sweet tribute to her family at the funeral by wearing her diamond Richmond brooch, which has a special story behind it. The sparkling piece came from her grandmother Queen Mary's collection, and may well be nostalgic to the Queen as she wore it regularly during her early reign for formal engagements with her husband. She has also worn it to military remembrance events in the past. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were pictured chatting with Prince Harry as they walked out of the chapel following the moving service. It was the first time the trio had been pictured together since the Commonwealth Day service in 2020. As per Prince Philip's request, there was military involvement at the service. In line with the late royal's wishes, action stations, which is sounded on naval warships to signal all hands must go to battle stations, was played at the end. Buglers of the Royal Marines performed the wartime alert, a tradition sometimes associated with naval funerals, in honor of the Duke's active service in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. Following the funeral, the nation remained in a period of national mourning, until the 18th of April. The royals opted to undertake 2 weeks of national mourning, which ended on the 22nd of April. That is all for today news. Please make sure to leave your comment and subscribe the channel below for more news update.